The Thanari warship's command deck fell silent as the holoscreen displayed a lone figure standing on the ridge. Just one human, dwarfed by the scorched landscape where a city once stood. Commander Vex'lar leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing in contempt. That's it? That's Earth's final defense? The alien commander's voice resonated through the chamber, triggering a wave of chittering laughter from his officers. After 3 orbital bombardments and the fall of their last military outpost, they send 1 soldier? Lieutenant Cross, the youngest officer on deck, magnified the image. Bioscan indicates standard human physiology, Commander. No augmentations, minimal armor, conventional weaponry. Identity, Marcus Reeves, former Earth Alliance Special Forces. The female human with him is identified as Dr. Elara Chen, xenobiologist. How disappointing, Vex'lar sighed, his exoskeletal plates shifting in what passed for amusement among the Thanari. 12 worlds have fallen before us. Species with technology far beyond these primitives surrendered in days. Yet these humans persist in this futility. The Council expected more resistance, Commander, Cross noted, studying the readouts. This human doesn't appear to pose any tactical threat. Vex'lar rose from his command chair, towering nearly 9 feet tall. His chitinous armor gleamed under the ship's lights, adorned with trophy markings from conquered civilizations. Send down a Vanquisher unit. Let us record the extinction of humanity's pathetic resistance for the archives. I want this concluded before the next solar cycle. As the officers scrambled to execute his orders, Vex'lar stared at the human on the screen. So small, so fragile. The commander couldn't fathom how such a species had become the subject of so many warnings from the Galactic Council. What could you possibly do against us? He whispered to the image dot on the ridge below. Marcus Reeves watched the approaching dropships and smiled. 3 weeks earlier, humanity had still believed in diplomatic solutions. That faith died with the first wave of Thanari attacks. Marcus Reeves stood in the emergency command bunker beneath what remained of Denver, watching Admiral Hodge address the last gathering of Earth's unified military command. The holographic displays showed the grim reality: 90% of Earth's major cities reduced to ash, the orbital defense network obliterated, and the lunar colonies silent. Of the 12 billion humans alive 1 month ago, fewer than 2 billion remained. The Thanari battle doctrine is consistent across all their conquests, Admiral Hodge explained, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into her face. They deploy overwhelming force, eliminate military targets, then offer terms of surrender that amount to glorified slavery. Any resistance after their formal ultimatum results in planetary sterilization. Dr. Elara Chen, Earth's leading xenobiologist, stepped forward. Unlike the military personnel in their battle-worn uniforms, she wore simple civilian clothes, her black hair tied back tightly, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. The Thanari evolved as a hive species, she explained, bringing up biological schematics. They've since developed individual consciousness, but their psychology remains fundamentally collectivist. They cannot comprehend why, after demonstrating their overwhelming technological superiority, we continue to resist. Because we're human, Marcus said quietly, drawing several glances. As the former commander of Earth's most elite special operations unit, his words carried weight even though he'd returned to field operations years ago. We don't surrender just because the math says we should. Admiral Hodge nodded grimly. Which brings us to Operation Last Light. Our conventional forces can't match their technology. Our remaining nuclear arsenal can't penetrate their shields. But there's one advantage they don't understand. Humans fight differently when we're cornered, Marcus added. Precisely. The Admiral activated a secure holographic display. Our intelligence indicates the Thanari have never encountered significant guerrilla resistance. Their species evolved with a rigid military hierarchy that excels at overwhelming force but struggles with asymmetric warfare. They interpret our continued resistance as stubbornness, not strategy. Dr. Chen stepped closer to the display. We've also identified a critical vulnerability. The Thanari command structure is centralized through quantum-entangled neural links. Their entire invasion force is essentially operating as a single organism. One head, Marcus said, understanding dawning. Cut it off, and the body falls, the Admiral confirmed. The plan is simple but nearly impossible. A small team must infiltrate the command vessel, plant a specialized EMP device calibrated to the frequency of their neural network, and detonate it. Marcus looked at the schematics. That's a suicide mission. It's the only mission left, Admiral Hodge replied. We need volunteers. The best we have. Before anyone else could speak, Marcus stepped forward. I'll lead the team. The Admiral's expression softened momentarily. I expected you would. What no one expected was how quickly the plan would fall apart. 20 hours later, Marcus lay half buried in rubble, blood seeping through his tactical gear, watching the last transport ship carrying his team explode in the atmosphere. The Thanari had anticipated their approach, setting a trap that left Marcus as the sole survivor, and only because a collapsed building had hidden him from their sensors. As he dragged himself from the debris, a voice called out softly. "Commander Reeves? Are you alive?" Dr. Chen emerged from behind a shattered wall, her face smudged with ash but otherwise unharmed. She helped him to his feet, quickly examining his wounds. "The team?" she asked, though she clearly knew the answer. "Gone." Marcus winced as she applied a field dressing to his side. "Transport was hit before they reached the drop zone." "How did you find me?" "I tracked your emergency beacon." She helped him sit against a broken column. "I was supposed to be on your transport, but Admiral Hodge ordered me to take a different route. I have the device." She patted the reinforced case strapped to her back. "The specialized EMP that represented humanity's last hope. The operation is still viable," she insisted. "But we need to move. Thanari ground forces are sweeping this sector." Marcus assessed their situation with cold precision. 2 people, 1 injured soldier and 1 scientist tasked with infiltrating the most heavily defended warship in Earth's orbit, navigating through an army of 9-foot-tall armored aliens, planting a device at the ship's core, and somehow escaping before detonation. "Impossible odds," he muttered. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Certainly. But impossible is a scientific term meaning not yet accomplished." Despite everything, Marcus found himself smiling. "We need transportation, weapons, and a way past their orbital defenses." "There's an abandoned research facility 10 miles from here," Chen replied. "I worked there before the invasion. It might have what we need. Then we move now, while we still can." As they slipped away through the ruins, neither spoke about the probability of success. Some numbers were too grim to acknowledge. The Thanari called their elite shock troops Vanquishers for good reason. Standing over 10 feet tall and encased in adaptive battle armor that made them nearly impervious to conventional weapons, a single Vanquisher could eliminate an entire human platoon. Commander Vex'lar had dispatched 12. Marcus watched through high-powered binoculars as the dropship landed, disgorging the massive warriors. The sun glinted off their iridescent armor as they formed a precise formation, weapon systems humming to life. "Overkill," he commented, lowering the binoculars. "He sent enough firepower to level a city." Dr. Chen finished calibrating the device beside him. The abandoned research facility had yielded everything they needed: medical supplies to treat Marcus's wounds, advanced prototype weapons that could potentially penetrate Thanari armor, and most critically, a theoretical physicist's experimental gravity disruptor. "Classic psychological warfare," she replied without looking up. "They want to crush our spirits by showing overwhelming force against minimal resistance. They really don't understand humans at all, do they? Their species never developed symbolic resistance. The concept of fighting when victory is mathematically impossible doesn't exist in their culture." She closed the calibration panel. "The gravity disruptor is ready. It should create a localized field that will make their armor weight about 50 times normal for approximately 3 minutes. Marcus checked his weapons: a prototype plasma rifle, several experimental grenades, and the old combat knife he'd carried through a dozen conflicts. "And you're certain about the neural transmitter?" Chen nodded. "Their command neural network operates like a distributed consciousness. Each Vanquisher is directly linked to Commander Vex'lar. When you eliminate them, he experiences their deaths." "Good." Marcus's voice hardened. "I want him to feel every one." The plan was audacious to the point of insanity. Use the Vanquishers as bait, capitalize on the Thanari commander's arrogance, and turn the encounter into an opportunity to board the command ship. The Thanari would record the battle for their archives. Watching a lone human make a final stand would appeal to their sense of superiority. "They're approaching," Chen warned, packing the EMP device securely. "The command ship is moving into position to record your last stand." Marcus helped her into the hidden access tunnel they discovered. It led to an underground hangar where a small prototype stealth shuttle waited, their means of reaching the Thanari command ship while its sensors were focused on the battle. "Remember," she said, gripping his arm. "You only need to hold them for 8 minutes. That's how long it will take me to reach the shuttle and power it up." 8 minutes against 12 Vanquishers. Marcus shrugged. "I've faced worse odds." "No, you haven't," she replied seriously. "Nobody has. That's what makes it interesting." He checked his chronometer. "When you reach orbit, hold position behind their starboard sensor blind spot. I'll join you there." "How exactly do you plan to escape?" Marcus grinned. I'm going to hitch a ride. As she disappeared down the tunnel, Marcus took position on the ridge. Below, the Vanquishers advanced in perfect formation, their movements synchronized with mechanical precision. In orbit above, the massive command ship hovered, its sensors undoubtedly fixed on the lone human. He activated the gravity disruptor, feeling the slight distortion in the air as the field established itself in a 100-meter radius around his position. Let's give them a show, he muttered, raising the plasma rifle. On the command deck, Vex'lar watched with growing interest as the human took aim at his approaching Vanquishers. Magnify, he ordered. I want to see his face when he realizes the futility of resistance. The holoscreen zoomed in, showing the human's expression. To Vex'lar's surprise, there was no fear, only focused determination. Commander, Lieutenant Cross reported suddenly, we're detecting an unusual energy signature around the human's position. What type of? The question died as the first Vanquisher suddenly staggered, then collapsed to its knees, armor cracking under its own multiplied weight. Before anyone could react, a plasma bolt struck the struggling warrior directly in its visual sensor array. The shot penetrated with unexpected force, and the Vanquisher collapsed. Vex'lar felt a sharp pain lance through his consciousness as the neural link with his soldier severed violently. Every death sensation transmitted directly to his brain through the command network. Impossible, he hissed, mandibles clicking in agitation. Their weapons cannot penetrate our armor. On the screen, the human was already moving, using the terrain with remarkable efficiency as the remaining Vanquishers struggled against the suddenly crushing weight of their own armor. A second warrior fell, then a third, each death sending spikes of agony through Vex'lar's neural network. The human moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for such a fragile species, striking with precision at the weak points in the Thanari armor that should have been unknown to Earth's forces. Target that ridge with orbital cannons. Vex'lar roared. Calculating firing solution, an officer responded, but the human had disappeared among the rock formations, emerging moments later behind two more Vanquishers. He attached something to the back of each warrior's armor, small devices that detonated seconds later, sending electromagnetic pulses through their systems. Vex'lar clutched his head as two more neural connections terminated brutally. How is this possible? Lieutenant Cross whispered, mandibles trembling. He's just one human. On the battlefield below, Marcus Reeves wasn't thinking about the impossibility of his task. His world had narrowed to a series of tactical problems to be solved in sequence. The gravity disruptor had worked perfectly, leaving the Thanari warriors struggling to move under the crushing weight of their own armor. The experimental plasma rifle punched through their weakened defenses, and the EMP grenades he'd taken from the research facility disrupted their coordination. But it was his knowledge of their anatomy, meticulously explained by Dr. Chen during their preparation, that made each strike lethal. 5 down. 7 remaining. 3 minutes of the gravity disruption field left. Marcus dove behind a boulder as return fire vaporized the ground where he'd stood moments before. The Thanari were adapting, compensating for the increased gravity by adjusting their weapon systems for stationary firing. Time to change tactics. He activated his comm unit. Chen, status? Shuttle powered and ready, her voice came through clearly. 6 minutes until I reach orbit. Ahead of schedule. Good. He detached a device from his belt, a sonic emitter calibrated to the frequency of Thanari communication systems. I'm moving to phase 2. The remaining Vanquishers had formed a defensive circle, covering all approaches. Smart, but predictable, Marcus activated the emitter and threw it high over their position. As it descended, it broadcast a piercing signal directly into their neural network, a cascade of contradictory commands that momentarily confused their coordination. In that brief window of chaos, he struck point. 2 more Vanquishers fell before they could reorient. A third managed to track Marcus with its weapon system, but the increased gravity threw off its aim just enough for him to close the distance and plant an EMP grenade directly on its neural transmission node. 4 remaining. The gravity field flickered. 30 seconds left before it failed completely. On the command ship, Vex'lar was experiencing something entirely new to his species, fear. 8 of his elite warriors dead, their dying experiences branded into his consciousness through the neural network. Recalibrate the orbital cannons, he shouted. I want that human dead. Commander, Cross reported, voice shaking, our sensors are detecting a small energy signature launching from a concealed location 3 kilometers from the battle site. Another human vessel? Vex'lar turned to the sensor officer. Track it. Destroy it. Attempting to lock on, but it's using some form of stealth technology, the officer replied. It's headed for orbit. Vex'lar's mind raced, suddenly understanding. It's a diversion. The battle is a diversion. Below, the gravity field collapsed. The 4 remaining Vanquishers surged forward, their movements once again fluid and deadly. Marcus had anticipated this moment, already sprinting toward a narrow ravine where their size would work against them. The first Vanquisher rounded the corner, weapon raised, and found itself staring at an abandoned plasma rifle rigged with the last of the EMP grenades. The detonation disabled its systems long enough for Marcus to climb its immobilized form and drive his combat knife through a gap in its neck plating directly into the neural bundle that Dr. Chen had identified as their critical weakness. Point 3 left. On the command ship, Vex'lar made a decision. Prepare a second dropship. I will lead the next wave personally. His officers stared in shock. A commander never engaged directly. It violated every principle of Thanari warfare. Commander, protocol dictates. Cross began. Protocol has failed. Vex'lar snarled. This human has killed 9 Vanquishers. 9. No species in our conquest history has managed such a feat. He strode toward the deck exit. Track that stealth vessel. I will deal with this human myself. As the door closed behind him, Lieutenant Cross turned to the sensor officer. Continue attempting to lock onto the stealth vessel. And... He hesitated. Prepare the command chair for emergency disconnection from the neural network. A contingency never before implemented in Thanari military history. Below, Marcus dispatched the 10th Vanquisher and assessed his situation. 2 enemies remaining, but his body was reaching its limits. Blood seeped through hastily applied field dressings, and his breathing had become labored. His comm unit activated. Marcus, Chen's voice came through, I've reached orbit. The command ship sensors are focused on your position. I'm approaching their blind spot now. Good. He ducked as plasma fire scorched the air above him. Change of plans. I'm detecting a second dropship launching from the command vessel. Reinforcements? No. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he studied the approaching craft. It's different. Smaller, faster. I think their commander is coming down personally. That's unprecedented. Chen's voice reflected his own surprise. Their command hierarchy never engages directly. We got under their skin. Marcus allowed himself a grim smile. Proceed with the original plan. Board the command ship, find the central neural hub, and plant the device. I'll deal with the commander and join you. How? Their dropships have automated defenses. You can't just climb aboard. Watch me. The final 2 Vanquishers had pinned down his position, laying down suppressive fire from opposite angles. Behind them, the new dropship was descending rapidly. Marcus checked his remaining equipment, 1 functional EMP grenade, his combat knife, and a grappling line. No more plasma charges for the rifle. Time for the final gambit. He calculated trajectories, timing, angles of fire, then threw the EMP grenade high into the air, arcing it precisely between the 2 Vanquishers. As they tracked the grenade, he sprinted forward, directly into their line of fire. The grenade detonated, momentarily disrupting their systems. Not enough to disable them completely, but enough for Marcus to slide between them, slashing with his knife at the hydraulic lines visible beneath their knee joints. Thanari biomechanical fluid sprayed as both warriors staggered. Before they could recover, Marcus had already put 50 meters between them, running directly toward the landing dropship, the ship's defensive systems activated, tracking his approach with automated turrets. Marcus zigzagged, the ground erupting behind him as plasma bolts barely missed their mark. 30 meters. 20. 10. The dropship settled on the ground, its hatch beginning to open. Marcus fired his grappling line, the magnetic hook latching onto the ship's hull. As the automated defenses recalibrated for his new trajectory, he activated the line's retraction mechanism, launching himself upward. The 2 wounded Vanquishers fired simultaneously. 1 bolt missed entirely. The other grazed Marcus's leg, searing through armor and flesh. He gritted his teeth against the pain, momentum carrying him upward as the hatch fully opened. Commander Vex'lar emerged, his ornate armor gleaming, for eyes widening in shock as the human hurtled directly toward him. Marcus collided with the Thanari commander, the impact sending them both tumbling back into the dropship. Before Vex'lar could recover, Marcus jammed his combat knife into the ship's control panel, sending sparks cascading across the interface. The hatch slammed shut. The engines roared. What have you done? Vex'lar demanded, rising to his full height, towering over the injured human. Created a one-way trip to your command ship, Marcus replied, dropping into a combat stance despite his injuries. Just you and me, Commander. Understanding dawned in the alien's multifaceted eyes. Clever. But futile. You cannot defeat me personally, human. I don't need to defeat you, Marcus replied with a cold smile. I just need to keep you busy. In orbit, Dr. Chen guided the stealth shuttle into the command ship's blind spot. The massive vessel's security systems were focused on tracking the commander's dropship, creating the opening she needed. using the access codes they had extracted from captured Thanari technology, she bypassed the exterior security measures and located a maintenance airlock. The EMP device was secure in its carrying case, strapped to her back as she made her way through the alien vessel's labyrinthine corridors. Her expertise as a xenobiologist had never been more valuable. Understanding Thanari biology allowed her to predict their ship design, life support systems, neural network hubs, command structures all would follow patterns dictated by their evolutionary history. The central neural hub would be located at the core of the ship, protected by multiple security layers. But with the commander absent and the crew distracted by Marcus's unprecedented assault, she moved through the vessel with surprising ease. Inside the dropship, the battle between human and Thanari was anything but easy. Vex'lar possessed strength and reach advantages that should have ended the fight in seconds. Yet Marcus moved with a fluidity born from decades of combat experience, anticipating the commander's attacks, using the confined space to neutralize the alien's advantages. "Your species is remarkable," Vex'lar acknowledged as they circled each other, both bleeding from multiple wounds. "In 12 conquest campaigns, I have never encountered such persistence." "That's your fundamental mistake," Marcus replied, ducking under a powerful swing and landing a precise strike to one of the commander's auxiliary breathing organs. "You see persistence as irrational. We see it as essential." The dropship shuddered as it docked with the command vessel. Both combatants braced themselves against the bulkheads. "Your female companion," Vex'lar's eyes narrowed. "She carries a weapon." "Not a weapon," Marcus corrected. "A reset button." The docking procedure completed. The hatch would open automatically, returning the commander to his vessel. Marcus had perhaps 30 seconds before the dropship would be swarming with Thanari troops. A suicide mission, Vex'lar realized. "You never intended to survive." "Survival is preferred," Marcus replied. "But not required." The hatch began to open. Marcus lunged forward in a final, desperate attack. On the command deck, Lieutenant Cross monitored the situation with growing alarm. The commander's dropship had docked, but the neural network was reporting severe distress from Vex'lar's connection. "Security teams to the docking bay," he ordered. "The human is aboard with the commander." "Lieutenant," the sensor officer called out, "we're detecting an energy surge in section Gamma 7, near the central neural hub." Krause's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Thanari equivalent of a human's blood running cold. "The female. Scan for human life signs throughout the ship." Before the order could be executed, emergency alerts blared across the command deck. On the main screen, security footage showed Dr. Chen standing before the central neural hub, the EMP device already activated and counting down. "Impossible," Krause whispered. "How did she bypass all security protocols?" In the docking bay, Marcus and Commander Vex'lar tumbled from the dropship, still locked in combat. Thanari security forces surrounded them but hesitated to fire with their commander in the fray. Vex'lar finally managed to pin Marcus to the deck, his superior strength prevailing. "Your resistance ends here, human. Your companion will be captured, your device disabled, and your species will join the others who foolishly opposed the Thanari dominion." Marcus smiled through bloodied lips. "Check your neural network, Commander." Vex'lar's eyes widened as he received the emergency alert. His head snapped up toward a nearby monitoring screen, which showed Dr. Chen standing calmly beside the activated device. "Emergency disconnect," he roared into the ship's communication system. "Sever all neural links. Now." But it was too late. In the central hub, Dr. Chen watched the final seconds tick down. "For Earth," she whispered as the device reached 0. The specialized EMP detonated, sending precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulses through the ship's systems. But its primary target was the quantum-entangled neural network that connected every Thanari warrior to their command structure. Throughout the massive vessel, Thanari soldiers collapsed as their neural links overloaded. On the command deck, Lieutenant Krause and the officers fell writhing to the floor, their nervous systems overwhelmed by the cascading failure of a network designed never to disconnect. In the docking bay, Commander Vex'lar screamed, his 4 eyes bulging as the neural feedback surged through his advanced command implants. His grip on Marcus loosened as his limbs spasmed uncontrollably. Marcus pushed the commander aside and staggered to his feet, fighting through his injuries to make his way toward the central hub. The corridors were littered with incapacitated Thanari warriors. None dead. The EMP wasn't designed to kill, only to sever the neural connections that had defined their species' approach to warfare for millennia. When Marcus finally reached the central hub, he found Dr. Chen calmly uploading data to a portable drive. "Cutting it close, Commander," she remarked without looking up. "Traffic was terrible," he replied, leaning against the doorway. "The device worked better than expected. The neural feedback has temporarily paralyzed their entire command structure." They're alive but completely disconnected from each other for the first time in their evolutionary history. She pocketed the drive. I'm downloading their star charts and tactical databases. Knowledge that might help us rebuild. Rebuild? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You sound optimistic. The Thanari will recover eventually, she acknowledged. But they'll never be the same. Experiencing individual consciousness, true isolation, it will transform their society. And now we have time. Time for what? She finally looked up, a fierce determination in her eyes that matched his own. To ensure this never happens again. To build defenses based on their technology. To prepare humanity for the galaxy as it truly is. And the commander? Alive. Changed. She gestured to a monitor showing Vex'lar being helped to his feet by surviving crew members. The once imposing figure moved with uncertainty, his movements no longer carrying that mechanical precision. He's experiencing true individual consciousness for the first time. They all are. Marcus nodded slowly. So we didn't just win a battle. We changed the course of 2 species. She approached him, examining his wounds with professional detachment. You need medical attention. There's an infirmary 2 decks down. What about the rest of the Thanari fleet? The neural disruption propagated through their quantum communication network. Every ship, every soldier, all disconnected simultaneously. They're in disarray, operating as individuals rather than a collective. As they made their way through the ship, they passed groups of Thanari warriors struggling to adapt to their new reality. Some looked at the humans with what might have been fear, others with a newfound curiosity. In the ship's infirmary, as Dr. Chen treated his wounds, Marcus watched a group of Thanari engineers attempting to coordinate repairs without their neural network. They're adapting already, he observed. Learning to communicate verbally instead of telepathically. Of course they are, Chen replied. Adaptation is the universal constant. They're discovering it. We've always known it. A movement at the infirmary entrance drew their attention. Commander Vex'lar stood there, his imposing frame somehow less threatening now. His 4 eyes studied them with what might have been respect. You could have killed us all, the commander said, his voice lacking its former resonance without the neural amplification. Why didn't you? Marcus met the alien's gaze steadily. Because that's not who we are. Yet you fought with such ferocity. We fight hardest when defending what we love. But cruelty for its own sake? That's not strength. It's weakness. Vex'lar seemed to consider this. The council warned us about humanity. They said your species was dangerous not for your technology, but for your adaptability. Your unpredictability. And now? Dr. Chen asked. Now I understand. The commander's mandibles moved in what might have been the Thanari equivalent of a rueful smile. You were never fighting to destroy us. You were fighting to transform us. He turned to leave, then paused. The fleet is withdrawing from Earth orbit. Not in retreat, but in reconsideration. When we return, it will not be as conquerors. As the commander departed, Marcus and Chen exchanged a glance. Did we just end a war and establish first contact in the same day? Marcus asked. I believe we did. Chen finished bandaging his wounds. The question is, what happens next? Marcus looked out the viewport at Earth below, scarred but unbowed. We rebuild. We prepare. And we remember what made the difference when facing impossible odds. Which was? Not our weapons or technology, he said quietly. But our humanity. On the command deck, Commander Vex'lar stood before the viewscreen, watching Earth rotate slowly below. For the first time in his existence, his thoughts were truly his own, not filtered through the collective consciousness of his species. It was terrifying. Exhilarating. Lieutenant, he addressed Kraz, who was adapting to individual consciousness with remarkable resilience, prepare a transmission to the council. Tell them we have much to learn from these humans. As the command ship broke orbit, joining the Thanari fleet in its withdrawal from Earth space, a new understanding spread through both species. The humans had proven that determination could overcome technology, that spirit could defeat numbers, and that victory sometimes meant transformation rather than destruction, and across the stars, the word began to spread, beware humanity, not for their weapons, but for their indomitable will. They fight hardest when defeat seems certain. They think most clearly when chaos reigns. And most dangerous of all, they show mercy when victory is assured. For species that had evolved through conquest, such concepts were revolutionary. For humanity, they were simply who they had always been.